Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. Thank you all for gathering here today to witness this piece of visual media. Now, I don't want to make this intro too long because I assume if you're clicking onto this video in particular, you probably already know what TGB is, but in case this is your first time on this channel and you have no idea what a Western Jesus is, you're asking questions like, who the fuck is Frank? And why do you keep talking about bitch slap induced post-traumatic stress disorder? If this is you, then hello, welcome. But also, if you want to avoid any confusion about this series at all, feel free to take yourself on down to the description where you will find a playlist of the episodes that this video is in reference to. If you don't give a shit at all though, then feel free to just stay right here, mate. Pull up a seat. Don't be concerned if I start praising Micah Bell. This is not the man you think you know. But anyway, welcome everyone to the TGB ITW official tier list, version 1.0. Throughout the 6 episodes of TGB, we have witnessed the rise and fall of many powerful and not so powerful characters. We've seen everything from unbelievable acts of good to the darkest displays of evil. But as of the most recent episode, which is episode 6, who are the most powerful entities we have come across so far, and how exactly do they stack up against each other? Today, this will all be officially revealed through the power of a tier list. Now, don't get me wrong, I know tier lists were sort of the thing for a little while there, like, God, what was it, like a year ago now? But, I'm a tiny bit late to the trend, I will admit, but, yeah, doesn't matter. Let's rate some characters, mate. So, first of all, I should probably say, these rankings are of course subject to change due to whatever events unfold in the story. But, as of episode 6, this is where we stand. Of course, we have our main protagonist, our boy, Western Jesus. We have his telekinetically gifted best friend, Frank. We've got the BS PTSD affected homie, Micah. We've got Dutch. We've got Lenny. We've got the train conductor and his phantom shovel. We've got 3-Gun Gary, Javier, Kratos, Thomas Downs, the deer who killed Davey, the kingpin of animal on human crime, and last but not least, the leader of the Cliff Goblins. Now, it's honestly been a while since I've seen, majority of these episodes all the way through, so if I left anyone out that you deem, significant enough to be on this list that I didn't just mention, please leave them down in the comments with your ranking and why. But let's discuss for a moment, this is an important discussion. In the heat of all these terrifying current events, this really is the most important discussion we could be having. Here, on this tier list, how do these characters rank in terms of power? I was originally going to start with the least powerful to the most powerful, but I feel as though we should probably just jump right in with an S tier. Just get right in there straight away, mate. Because I feel it's pretty obvious that Frank could decimate every last one of these guys if he really wanted to. So let's chuck him over in the S tier real quick, doesn't really need too much explaining. Frank is a being of immense power. His telekinetic ability in itself puts him far above anyone else on its own. But that, in tandem with the fact that he's had so long to master this ability, the S ranking really speaks for itself. We have no idea how old Frank is, and really don't have a clue how long he's had to hone his abilities. We can only really assume that it has been a while though. His abilities really come as easy to him as blinking is for us, so yeah. We've also seen that Frank has an unbelievably high pain tolerance, and what seems to be a very Wolverine-like healing factor. More testing will obviously need to be done in terms of how this healing factor works and sort of how its limitations operate, but yeah, Frank is a very, very powerful being with really only a few weaknesses that tie him back. Those, of course, being his fear of rabbits and his incredibly lazy attitude, but yeah, regardless, definitely deserving of that S tier ranking. Moving right along, I'd say the next logical choice would be to rank our boy here. And this was honestly a bit of a tough one when I was going into this. Arthur is obviously very powerful as well. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But I'm going to slide him over into A tier, and let me explain why real quick. Arthur has a ton of attributes to get through, but to sum his stats up in a sentence, he's a lot more of a all-rounder than what he is a powerhouse, if that makes sense. It's not at all a bad thing, but, you know, he's still right up there for sure in terms of raw power, but he's a lot more spread across different areas than what an S tier like Frank is. Another thing that really works in Arthur's favor, though, is how adaptive he is to his environments. I mean, his ability to evolve to combat whatever obstacle is in front of him at the time has sometimes been instantaneous. I mean, we've seen it with abilities like Holy Perception and most recently Falling in Style. These things have just snapped into place on the spot, and that is a pretty highly valued skill that you really can't learn or teach for that matter. It's something you've just got to have, and I can safely say that nobody else on this list has that besides Arthur. So yeah, that in combination, of course, with his iron will, which goes hand in hand with his ability to resist pain, not to the extent that Frank can, of course, but still quite significantly. Arthur is absolutely deserving of that A tier. And I was thinking, you know, it really wouldn't surprise me with Arthur's constant ability to adapt and evolve, as we just discussed. He's constantly becoming more powerful. I mean, if we compare episode 1 Arthur with episode 6 Arthur, it's really no comparison at all. I mean, they still have the same drive to do good. That's of course been there from the beginning, but there have been constant improvements to his skill set the whole way through. It's definitely a possibility that one day we could see Arthur up in that S tier. As long as he keeps evolving, it really wouldn't surprise me. Now, moving on from our main stars for a second, let's shift our focus over to some stinky, stanky villains. TGB would be nothing without its villains. You know, they mostly represent the adversity that Western Jesus needs to overcome in each episode. It is a shame that they make my dive into insanity that much more painful, but they're definitely an important part of this series regardless. So, let's begin with a little bit of an underrated villain from episode 2 that I don't think I really emphasized my hate for enough. Coming in with 3-Gun Gary. Pain in my ass. Don't get me wrong, you know, I mentioned him a good deal in episode 2, if you remember. I described that he'd given me a little trouble when it came to disarming him due to him having 3 fucking weapons at his disposal, but looking back on it, I didn't mention this prick enough. He gave me a lot more trouble than what I showed in episode 2. He caused a lot more of my deaths and a lot more of my overall frustration in the grand scheme of things. So how does he rank in terms of power? He's human, no signs of any enhanced abilities or anything like that, but this man's arsenal and marksmanship is what sets him apart from, you know, the gangs that he runs with. Armed with 2 pistols, a rifle, and a name that looks like it came straight out of a BO2 lobby, we're gonna slide 3-Gun Gary right down into E tier. And it might seem harsh, it might appear a little too low given everything I just said, but at the end of the day, in relativity to many of the characters on this list, he really isn't all that powerful, especially once he's stripped of his weapons. I mean, he did prove that he could handle himself in the event of being completely disarmed, but with all the weaknesses that come with being a regular dude with a couple of boomsticks, the E tier seems quite fitting at this point. With that being said, and this definitely needs to be emphasized, all throughout episode 2, he was still an annoying little fuck. Next up here, we have a character who isn't exactly a villain, but I've put him in this category purely because he is someone who's proved to be quite a detriment to Arthur's mission so far. Much like 3-Gun Gary, Dutch is merely a human with no abilities that set him aside from anybody. But what's different about Dutch is that he is infinitely more useless. Infinitely. He is a very, very weak character due to the multitude of flaws that draw him back, coupled with the lack of any strengths to balance him out. A tendency to sit back and let everybody else do the work, extremely poor marksmanship, and frequent existential nightmares set him at the bottom of our list in the stinky, smelly F tier. And joining him in the foul-smelling F tier will be quite a recent addition to TGB, and that is Thomas Downs. This one doesn't really need that much explaining, you know, he's old, he's frail, his bones are brittle, mustache game is pretty strong but it really isn't doing him any favors. Only ability he has is one that allows him to sustain horrific facial injuries after exclusively hitting his tailbone. Perfect F tier candidate, really don't see him moving on up anytime soon. Next up, we have the one, the only, train conductor with his phantom shovel. An extremely powerful adversary to Western Jesus, not only in a physical sense, but also in terms of how threatening he was to Arthur's mission. Very few enemies, actually, since then, have threatened the success of Arthur's 0-kill goal more than this guy, and his trusty phantom shovel, of course. And honestly, if it wasn't for Lenny's sudden burst of confidence that got us through the end there, we may never have passed him successfully. Arthur is no doubt more powerful overall in many areas, but the Conductor definitely pushed back and held his own long enough to be labeled a massive threat. The origins of his phantom shovel are completely unknown, but its ability to shatter every single bone in somebody's face at unbelievable speed is very well documented. This tool definitely adds to his ranking as a whole. I mean, we haven't seen him without his shovel at any point either, so it's really hard to say what sort of effect it would have on his ranking if he was to be parted with it. But from what we do know, and from what we've been able to observe, the Conductor is absolutely deserving of a freshly scented B tier. Not quite as powerful as Arthur in the end, but undoubtedly a force to be reckoned with.
And between you and me, my hair is thinning a bit.
Kratos, the God of War. First appearance and last appearance was TGB Episode 5, and I think we all remember his very unfortunate and self-inflicted demise. But you know, before his life tragically ended in a freak campfire accident, how would he rank among our boys here? Just how powerful was the God of War? The answer is not very powerful at all. I mean, we first stumbled across Kratos while rescuing the very intoxicated Reverend Swanson, and we don't know exactly what the Reverend did to upset him, but Kratos was very determined to rid him from the planet entirely for whatever reason. Only problem was, Frank and Arthur were there to stop him, and he really didn't stand much of a chance in the end at all. That's not to say that he's completely useless though. I mean, he did prove very persistent. He had quite a strong determination, and getting caught in a flurry of his attacks actually proved quite dangerous, as his godlike physical strength was even quite effective against Arthur. But that's about where his perks end. His godlike physical strength is drawn back by what powers it, which is his anger. This, of course, is what led him to his demise as he stumbled into an active campfire in a blind rage. So while he's definitely more powerful than your average human, he's also infinitely more careless. I was contemplating sliding him over into E tier alongside 3-Gun Gary, but I have a feeling that 3-Gun Gary's arsenal still wouldn't stand much of a chance against Kratos, especially at max anger, and definitely if there weren't any active campfires around, so not really fair to put Kratos alongside someone he could definitely beat. So I'm going to chuck him up in D tier for now. 3-Gun Gary fans are probably absolutely fucking fuming right now, but you know, these are the difficult calls that need to be made. We're almost finished with the villains here, so get ready for it.
I'm going to hit you with a double whammy real quick.
We have the deer who killed Davey, and the most recent kingpin of animal on human crime, this rabbit. Now, I put these two together obviously because they really are quite similar in almost every way. Just two high-ranking members of the animal's criminal underworld, both of which were responsible for various murders, and both of which were taken down in an almost identical way. But that isn't to say that these boys here aren't dangerous in their own right. I'm gonna put them both over here into C tier, and while that might seem surprising for some, it's for a good reason. These boys right here are mostly ranked so highly because of their influence and connections. They're a part of a constantly cycling system of non-human criminals that plague the West, murdering innocent travelers, terrifying entire towns, going 95 in a school zone. Every evil act you could possibly think of, this network of criminals are going for it. So while they aren't quite as powerful on a surface level compared to some of the others on this list, their control over this ever-growing network of four-legged henchmen definitely makes them powerful enough in that sense for a big old C tier. Obviously wouldn't rank them any higher, as their individual attributes are pretty standard, but their connections and influence definitely set them apart from some of the others on this list. Now, for the final villain. I've had some trouble deciding exactly where this man should be placed. It's been a bit of a mission, but after much deliberation, I think I have an answer. The leader of the Cliff Goblins. One of, if not the biggest challenge our boys have faced yet. A being that challenged and tormented Western Jesus like nobody else could. The leader of an army known as the Cliff Goblins, a subdivision of bounty hunters that operate in large packs, utilizing their strength in numbers and extensive knowledge of the cliff and cave systems around the West to trap, ambush, and defeat their opponents. Very intelligent, extremely coordinated, and highly dangerous. It wouldn't make much sense to rank their leader among any of the other villains we've listed so far. Their power can definitely be attributed to the leader's ability to guide them through every ambush. And so while I was going to put him over in B tier next to the Conductor, I think him and his army are much more deserving of an A tier. Really, I think after what we saw last episode, these guys definitely matched Arthur's current power level at the very least. They just caused way too much trouble for Arthur last episode for me to put them any lower. I mean, Arthur did beat them in the end, so it feels kind of odd having them there, but they're definitely more powerful in numbers than what the train conductor is, and the leader comes as a package with his army, so it wouldn't really be accurate for me to say that the train conductor could take on that entire team. In saying that, I do think that Arthur is overall more powerful than the Cliff Goblins, especially given the results that we saw last episode. So, if there was an A- tier, I'd have them slightly below Arthur. They're definitely still an A, but sort of leaning closer towards a B more than what they would an S.
Whatever you build, I will break.
We're moving right on from the villains of TGB and diving right into Arthur and Frank's homies.
Hey everyone, Mark Simpson again.
And to kick that off, we're gonna start with our boy, Lenny. Lenny is a good boy with a good heart and horrible fucking accuracy. He's a good boy in training, and Arthur has a lot of faith that one day he'll be able to crusade against all the evil in the West alongside himself and Frank. But right now, it's much too dangerous. And we saw a good example of why he wasn't ready for that in episode 3, when he was thrown into the deep end in a V-Buck robbery gone wrong. Now, in the end, I don't want any confusion here. He did prove himself and did help the boys out of a horrible situation, but things could have gone very differently considering his current skill set. There was definitely some luck involved there. As I said, Lenny is a good boy in training. His skills haven't exactly had a lot of time to develop yet. He definitely has a long way to go in that regard. His accuracy is all over the place, his holy perception is non-existent, and he does have a tendency to get wiped off the face of the planet more than most. The only thing that seems to really be on his side is that he has heart. He looks up to the boys, and he definitely has a major willingness to observe and learn from them as much as he can. So while I will have to put his sweet soul into E tier, unfortunately, I absolutely expect him to move up the rankings in the future. He has a lot of potential, as we saw in the end of episode 3, and he has the goodest boys to learn from. So I definitely think that Lenny is one that we should all keep an eye on going forward. Next up here we have Javier, and I really don't want to say that much about Javier, to be honest. I want to put him in F tier. Seriously, for being so lazy on a consistent basis, but the thing is, he does have the capability to come through and do some serious damage when it's needed. He does. I'd be lying if I said he doesn't. Now, I didn't show much of it in the ending of episode 6 because the video was already so long, but he really did come through in the final battle to rescue Sean. I can't lie. And on top of that, he had displayed some pretty advanced Deadeye capabilities against the enemies on horseback, which was earlier in that mission. So again, while I really do want to send him to the F tier for his laziness that ruined the waterfall strategy and did set us back a whole lot in that mission, I just can't. He might not show it all the time, but he does have the capability to do great when he actually applies himself. Why the fuck do I sound like Walter White all of a sudden? Christ.
Yeah, mate, you just gotta fucking apply yourself sometimes, eh? Come on, Jesse. Come on, mate, you gotta give it a red hot shot sometimes, mate.
Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare yourself. Last up, we have an absolute behemoth among the rankings. An absolute war machine, a bringer of death, but in the name of good. When we first met Micah in episode 1 of TGB, he was just as hated as he is in Red Dead Redemption. And honestly, it was for good reason too. He showed no interest whatsoever in assisting Arthur in his mission, even going as far to run away in his time of need. He appeared disloyal, uncaring, and weak. But episode 2 of TGB was a very, very important episode for Micah, as it was the beginning of his evolution into one of the most powerful beings in this entire series. A combination of watching our boys suffer through days of torture, combined with one too many bitch slaps, resulted in a Hulk-like transformation, turning Micah into an unstoppable machine, a dangerous warrior, harnessing the ability of BSPTSD. Now, Micah has grown and grown as the series has progressed, and he's proven himself not only to be a valuable ally to the boys, but also as their closest friend. Arthur, Frank, and Micah really do have a genuine bond. They fight together, they eat together, they play WWE SmackDown vs. Raw on the PS2 during school nights together. They're about as tight as it gets. And being so close with Micah has really given the boys a look into just how much his transformation has changed him. BSPTSD has given Micah some amazing side effects and additions to his skill set. Improved strength, enhanced weapon proficiency, a battle-hardened bravery. He's almost the perfect soldier. Almost. You see, unfortunately, BSPTSD comes with quite a large negative. That negative being the cooldown period. After an intense bout of BSPTSD is activated, Micah has been known to shut down completely. So much energy is expended, and so much power is put to use, that Micah experiences a sort of reboot that he needs time to get through. We've seen 2 examples of this now, most recently in episode 5, and Micah's been missing ever since. Bouts of BSPTSD affect his mind state even after the initial shutdown has passed, and so until he finds a way to balance the sheer intensity of these episodes, a degradation of his mindset will remain an unfortunate side effect. So, for the final verdict, taking into consideration both the pros and the cons of Micah's abilities, he is definitely still deserving of at least an A tier. He's much closer to an S tier than what the Cliff Goblins would be, but the side effects of his abilities are what sort of sets him a little lower overall in the rankings. So there we have it. Ladies and gentlemen, the official TGB power ranking tier list as of episode 6.